According to an email many of us received many years ago on August 14, 2016, Freemasons will enact their revenge. What's worrisome? The Olympic Games in Rio will be ongoing. What was unique about this email? It was the center of spams and copies. I have decided to repost it here for anyone to hear. Stay paranoid and safe, my friends. The following message from someone who wishes to remain anonymous and who states that his life could be endangered if his identity were revealed. This person claims to have inside information about the Georgia Guidestones, including the identity of R.C. Christian and the meaning of the cube recently added to the monument. The cube was soon removed and destroyed by someone who appears to be Mart Clamp. Additionally, the author claims that the cube was inscribed with a date for Judgment Day, presumably the time he calls the Great Culling. I have preserved the author's anonymity and added a few comments in his message below. Besides a few edits that I made for formatting purposes, the message is otherwise unchanged. Sorry about the last enigmatic email. I had to do a trace route to figure out the best way to email you, so I couldn't put anything in it that meant squat. With that out of the way, here's the real deal. I voluntarily am trusting this information only to you and one other agent of truth. Both of you agents have the capacity and audience to make public what I am going to tell you in an effective manner. I hope at least one of you do. Do not cite my name, I am an anonymous source. If my name is ever brought up by you publicly, I will disavow knowing you. Publicly disclosing me as your source could literally lead to my death, so please do not do it. All other information I give you, however, feel free to disseminate. Here is the truth as I know it to be. The Georgia Guidestones were built by Freemasons. This should come as no surprise. Let me tell you why they were built where they were built first. The Guidestones were built in Elbert County for a few reasons. One reason, vast quantities of pyramid blue granite, truly good for monument building. The granite continues this day as a mecca, attracting many Freemason tradesmen. Another reason, Elberton, the town, was founded by Freemasons. As a matter of fact, it was named after Samuel Elbert, a very famous historical Freemason you can read plenty about. Even in his day, Elbert's life was spared by a British Mason officer's bayonet due to recognizing him as a Mason during battle. Elbert's Mason-coded cry of distress. Lastly, Elbert County sits on an easternmost edge of the continent. This is very meaningful to Masons because the sun rises in the east. It is common knowledge that Masons consider the sun and its rising to be metaphorically divine. This is why for over 20 years Elberton's sister city was Mure, Kagawa, Japan, the land of the rising sun. So who masterminded the Guidestones specifically? Lore points to R.C. Christian. Much debate has been made about who this man was. And some people have guessed correctly, yet not correctly. The big secret? R.C. Christian was actually two men. Robert Carter Cook was the mastermind. Robert Edward Ted Turner III was the talking face that Joe Fendley and Wyatt Martin actually interacted with. We have maintained that Ted Turner's relationship with Wyatt C. Martin suggests his involvement with the Georgia Guidestones, but his role is not clear. Fendley and Martin both described Christian as a tall middle-aged man with white hair in a three-piece suit and tie, and that's how Ted looked back then. Robert Carter Cook looked nothing like that. He was short with dark hair and loved bow ties. Ted Turner has been a eugenics supporter for years. It takes little research to find interviews with him pushing the subject. Robert Carter Cook headed eugenics organizations such as Planned Parenthood League, American Eugenics Society, and the Association for Research in Human Heredity, and many other groups too numerous to recall. Robert C. Carter had ties with Joseph Mengele to give you a degree of seriousness. Robert Carter Cook was a big fan of Thomas Paine, who was also a Freemason, hence his famous essay in support of them. Thomas Paine, as you know, wrote The Age of Reason, and it is this essay referred to by the Guidestones' own Age of Reason. Ted Turner knew Robert Carter Cook and worked with him on the Guidestone project. I wouldn't say they were friends, but they had a mutual interest. Ted Turner financed the project, but Robert Cook masterminded it. Robert Carter Cook also wrote the book Common Sense Renewed that serves as a companion piece to the Guidestones. If you contrast the writing styles and ideas in R.C. Christian's Common Sense Renewed with Robert Carter Cook's earlier book Human Fertility, The Modern Dilemma, you will have no doubt of this. Freemason connection. Robert Cook and Ted Turner, both of these men were Freemasons. Ted Turner is of the Order of Malta. I am not sure what order Robert C. Carter was involved in, only that he was a Mason. He is listed as such in the Denslow record. Joe Fendley the granite mogul and Wyatt Martin the banker is both Freemasons. Wyatt Martin denied being a Freemason when I interviewed him, as were the majority of men who helped to construct the guidestones, including the sandblaster Charlie Clamp Van. This is probably an understatement. I was told by Mart Clamp, caretaker of the monument and son of Charlie Clamp, that virtually every hand that touched the Georgia Guidestones during its construction belonged to a Freemason. I don't want to denigrate every Freemason involved in this project though, because one stood up for what was right and paid for it. I want to vouch for the credibility of one Freemason during the 1979 Guidestone project. John Kirk Nicholson, Jr. This man was the Grand Master of the Georgia Freemasons during 1979. He was expelled in 1979 because he disagreed with the Guidestone project. Too bad for him that Scottish Freemasons above his rank did not agree and had him expelled. John Kirk Nicholson, Jr. was the first Grand Master Freemason of GA to be expelled in the nearly 200 years of Grand Masters that preceded him. It was not until 2008 that another Grand Master was expelled, Carl W. Doane Van. This appears to be largely correct, although Doane was not a Grand Master in 2008. Carl W. Doane knew in 2008 that the cube would be removed in 2009, and he knew why, and he did not agree with it. Because of this, Carl W. Doane was expelled just as John Kirk Nicholson, Jr. was. Before I tell you about the cube, a quick note about the time capsule. The time capsule has no date because this date will not be filled in until the day before the world's population is massively reduced. If it were filled in before then vandals would surely dig it up. The date is to be filled in shortly before the Great Culling. The time capsule will then be placed, along with another date set to be opened after 100 years. Now let's talk about the cube of recent note. There are a lot of lies and assumptions going on about this thing, and I will now set the record straight. First off, the first cube was always meant to be removed and replaced by the second cube. You can see in these pre-2009 pics that the first cube was already pre-cut for removal. You can see in those old pictures that the same detritus and grime that had worked its way into the lettering, had also worked its way into the slits cut for the cube. The cuts had always been there since the beginning. The second cube, the message cube, was always meant to go here eventually. In 2009, the first cube was removed. It was removed by Freemasons. It wasn't replaced for a few years due to internal debate within the Masons. However, authorities claimed it was removed by Vandals on September 11, 2009. Then they said it was recovered circa August 6, 2013. This was first claimed via a cover story on WSGC Radio. WSGC is a Freemason-owned radio station and website. This cover story is shockingly badly written, full of so many inconsistencies as to be laughable. I will list a few of them for you. Notice that the article has no author, so no accountability. Notice the mugshot of William Jeremy Ellis is computer-generated, an artificial collage photo made from a construct of layered faces. If you search for William Jeremy Ellis, you will find he never existed in Anniston, Alabama. The article says deputies saw the vandals on cameras and were tipped off like that van. As we reported in our first Georgia Guidestones article, the cameras were inoperable at that time, so it was impossible for the deputies to see the vandals on the cameras at the monument site. But then the article immediately says deputies got a call to go out there. Did the deputies call themselves? The fabricator of the article is so lazy as to not even bother making up information about the other two supposed vandals. The detective Scarborough claims to have talked to the gentleman in charge of the Guidestones, but it is common knowledge that the county of Elberton owns the Guidestones, not one particular person. Never mind the fact it makes zero sense that thieves would drive hundreds of miles to return years later what they had stolen for no apparent reason. And Scarborough says the police weren't sure what to do with the returned cube. Would a police officer say this? No. It'd be bagged as evidence, and after the trial, it would be returned to the guide stone it was taken from. This Snow article was written by a clueless faker. The returned stolen cube was fake as well. If you take a close look at the supposedly returned cube, you will see it is a piece of mostly uneven concrete with only one polished granite face. This is not the cube that was removed in 2009, it's a fake. It doesn't even have the peggings. By peggings I mean the pegs that jutted out from the original first cube. They were used to guide the original first cube into place and help hold it while the adhesive dried. Look at this picture. You can see the peg holes and the remnants of the adhesive. The hole sat open like this from 2009 until 2014. In 2014 the infamous second cube appeared. Albertan authorities claim they don't know how it got there. Were the deputies not watching the cameras? They can supposedly catch 3 men trying to replace a cube in 2013, but not someone else doing it again in 2014? Hard to believe, because it's a lie. Anyway, the second cube was removed and destroyed on September 25, 14. This was a few weeks after it was first discovered and shown on various social media outlets, enough time to be sure its appearance would be known. That way its disappearance would cause a stir. Again, social media, to get the information on the cube out to those who know how to read it worldwide. Now, I am sure you've seen the video. Like the WSGC article, the destruction video is a fraud. Pertinent questions quickly came to mind. How did all those people know that the second cube was going to be removed that day, and yet not a single actual news crew showed up? No reporters, no official cameras. Instead we are treated to a single video recorded off what appears to be a young woman's smartphone. The man who climbed the ladder and removed the cube. How did he know that he wouldn't need tools to remove it when he climbed the ladder? Why did the girl have all the time she needed to record all sides of the cube, without the officer making her step away from the evidence? And why did the ladder man bring the tools he needed to destroy the cube ahead of time? All of these questions are answered easily and obviously. This was a planned extraction for the purpose of information dispersion and cover-up. Those who needed to see the sides of the cube, Freemasons, were able to do so through social media. The rest of us were led to believe the 2014 cube was unwanted by Albertan County and was thus destroyed. Destroyed evidence with no culprits even mentioned as targets of investigation? Sounds fishy because it's a red herring. I'm sure it's of no surprise to you that most of the people involved in this recorded scene were Masons. Now let's talk about what the second cube means. So the cube says, 8/16/2014 mm jam. People first assume this is a date of August 16, 2014. That's because they read the cube in the wrong direction. They are reading the cube spun clockwise. This is wrong. Remember, the guide stones make a big deal out of Polaris. And viewed from Polaris the Earth turns counterclockwise. The cube date read in this direction becomes August 14, 2016. This is important for 2 reasons. The obvious being that unlike August 16, 2014, August 14, 2016 hasn't happened yet. But more importantly, August 14 is a day that means a lot to Freemasons. They hate that day, and for good reason. The first true public enemy the Freemasons had was William Morgan. Long story short, this man had access to secret Freemason rituals and materials and planned to make them public. He planned to expose the Freemasons via a book called Illustrations of Masonry, by one of the fraternity who has devoted 30 years to the subject. He obtained a copyright for this particular book on August 14, 1826. Shortly afterwards he was murdered by Freemasons. This led to the Morgan Affair, which led to the Masonic Party. To this very day, Freemasons loathe the date August 14. They see it as the point at which society at large turned against them. What better day then, for the Freemasons to enact their revenge? To turn against society? And thus we have the date of the second cube being, August 14, 2016. But what of the letters MM and JAM? MM stands for Master Mason. No surprise. Lots of people figured that one out. Nobody figured out JAM. I guess no one studies Latin anymore? JAM stands for Judici Anno Mundi. In the judgment of the world. Judgment Day. The second cube tells those who can read it that the Master Mason will bring Judgment Day on August 14, 2016. This is the extent of information that I can tell you. Research the things I've said, you will find all of it true. I leave this upon you and one other soul to decide what to do with all this information. Good luck and bless you as an agent of truth. From here on out, I do not exist. We will never speak again.